Good afternoon, everyone. I am so delighted that you came out on this rainy afternoon, so thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Before I even introduce myself, I'll let you know that we are recording this session, so we'll just let you know that mostly the cameras are focused up here, and so anything that's being recorded is just the back of your heads, unless you're up here, but just want to let everybody know that for your own awareness. My name is Molly Bell, and I'm one of the ministers here at Orleans United Church, along with my ministry partner, Mike Perot, who you'll meet in just a minute. And we are just delighted to welcome you here to Orleans United Church as one of the partners in the Healthy End of Life project. And as we begin this time together, I thought we could just open with a little time of prayer. The prayer that I have to share with you comes from actually our invitation to worship that we used last week in worship. And this is how things happened probably for the course of our HELP project, which was somebody had an idea and said, hey, what do you think? And everybody else said, hey, that's a great idea. And boom, that's how things happened. And so some folks from HELP were sitting and listening to this and said, this sounds like some way that we could open our time together. What do you think, Molly? And I said, hey, that's a great idea. So I'm going to share with you our invitation to worship from our worship last Sunday. We come from many places, along different paths, bringing different truths. We come with different histories and different realities, yet we come together as one people with faith that we can use our differences to heal ourselves and each other, to bring wholeness to a fractured world. We come seeking to find community, to find acceptance of who we are. In this place, we may find others who are much like us and others who are much different. May our time together remind us that we are a people taught by different stories with many voices, but always one people working for a world where love creates caring and caring gives birth to hope. And so we hope that this time together will offer you folks an opportunity to do just that, to hear some stories and hear our experiences as one faith community who participated in this Healthy End of Life project, what it offered to our faith community and what it might offer to your different communities, and offer you some pieces that you can bring back to your communities to bring opportunities for caring and hope. So we were indeed one of the faith communities that participated in the Healthy End of Life project, along with Carleton University. And so we're so delighted to have Pam Grasso as our partner at Carleton University and participate in that. And so we thought as we begin this time together, we would light 2 candles to symbolize the partnership that existed and that was so vital to this project. So come on up and let's light candles together. And it was a real privilege and honor for our congregation to be able to be a part of this project. And we were delighted to be able to be guinea pigs in this and hope that our efforts and our experiences will be one that will be of use to you folks. So here we go.
Hello, everyone. This is such an amazing opportunity to have all of you here. I'm I just, in so many ways, my life feels like it has blended from my personal family to my professional work. So my mom was a member of Orleans United Church, and her name is on one of the leaves over there because she passed away during COVID. And so there are places where being in this sacred space feels like a merging of end-of-life experiences and research and family all together in one. So I really appreciate having the opportunity to speak today. So today we are going to have someone speak from Compassionate Ottawa. And I think he's in transit. So I'm going to take on talking a little bit about Compassionate Ottawa. So if you don't know about Compassionate Ottawa, I'd really, really encourage you to check them out. They're a volunteer-run, nonprofit organization that has really come together in the last 6 years to focus on how we can become a more compassionate community, a more compassionate city. And the focus is one that it's really focusing on building the capacity of the citizens of Ottawa to be more capable and confident of helping themselves, their families, and their communities to live well, to die, and grieve well. And really this comes from a momentum that's been going on internationally, really recognizing that at one point death and dying did happen in our homes, did happen in our communities, and as things have become more medicalized, less and less of us have actually been at the bedside and know what end of life looks like, know what grief and loss look like. And so the focus is on really how do we share our experiences and finding ways that we push at the death denying and defying social cultural context we have, right? And so that's why I'm so grateful that you're here, because that shows me that you are of the group that are wanting to talk about death and dying and wanting to talk about how do we support each other in our communities to do this work. Compassionate Ottawa has been working in schools to work with material for kids to learn about end of life and supporting people when they're experiencing grief and loss. They've been working in workplaces, in faith communities, and in communities at large. The goal of Compassionate Ottawa is one that really focuses on changing attitudes and behaviors, educating, supporting, and empowering. And that's coming through initiatives like advanced care planning, grief and bereavement workshops, conversations with leaders, citywide events, and sponsor projects. And the Healthy End of Life Project is one of those sponsor projects. And I'm quite delighted to be able to speak a little bit about the work that we have done with Compassionate Ottawa. It's very important that Compassionate Ottawa is centered right at the beginning here, because while I'm the researcher, it's really a community-based project that we have really worked with here, and that's because we really believe that if you're going to make change, it's not led by me, it's led by people in your pews, right? You are the ones that are doing pastoral care, you're doing outreach, you know the people in your communities who are living with advanced illness, are facing end of life, are grieving, are caregiving. So how do we kind of come together to figure out how we support one another in a way that we don't shy away from talking about death and dying, we don't shy away from talking about grief and loss, but that we actually create spaces so that we can talk about these things and learn from one another. So the Healthy End of Life Project, when I started this project in 2019, we did a big launch at Carleton. Lots of our team were there, and then I received a very angry email from someone who said, "How dare you put the word healthy and end of life together in the same sentence?" And then talked about her own experiences of someone dying where it was anything but healthy. And I think that from the very beginning taught us about how what we're trying to do is talk about making end of life healthier, right? It's making sure that while we know that many deaths happen in emergency rooms, on stretchers, we also know that death can happen in different places. It can happen at home. It can happen in long-term care. It can happen in hospice. And I absolutely want to say very definitively that we still have a lot of work to do to make those deaths be one where we can have people supported as family members to support their loved one in end of life, and that we also have a way that our neighbors and our friends and our colleagues are able to knock on our door and say, I'm here, versus saying, what can I do? And then running away, which I think we can be really good at. Right? So some of our story then is to then say, so our project was one where we took a model from the Healthy End of Life project at La Trobe in Australia. And that particular model of program was one that really worked within municipalities to create change. So how do we support caregivers, neighbors, community members to feel okay about knocking on doors and offering support? How do we help people to think about death and dying and not be afraid to talk about what they're afraid of? And so our particular model of help was one where we wanted to move it from the municipal level to actually move it into communities. So we had 2 faith communities, Orleans United. Rabble rousers, if you don't know it yet, there are some movers and shakers in this community. Our other faith community site was Christchurch Bells Corners, which is in Bells Corners. And then we had 2 community health centers, Southeast Ottawa Community Health Center and Centertown Community Health Center. So we used a community-based approach for this work, and that was really informed by the idea that actually if you're going to make change, it's not about having healthcare providers do more and do more programs. It's actually about working in the community to say, where are your strengths? What do you do really, really well, right? And how do we learn from you? What can we build on of the work that you do in your faith communities? And how do we kind of move that to a level that we're offering more and more training to other people? I have met the most fabulous pastoral care team members, nurses, with lots of palliative care training. I've also met lots of people on advisory committees. Charles is here. Hello, Charles. Did you want to come and have a few minutes to talk about Compassionate Ottawa? That would be lovely.
And I just begin by saying my apologies for everyone for coming in 20 minutes late. Hi, Molly. I was out in Stittsville at another meeting, and I was buttonholed after the meeting, not because people thought what I had to say was great. In fact, they were trying to lobby me for their own point of view. So anyway, here I am. So this afternoon's session is about a project called Help Ottawa, which is the Healthy End of Life project. And I am involved in an Ottawa charity called Compassionate Ottawa, and we were the sponsors of the health project, which actually doesn't mean that we paid for it. What it means was that we came up with the concept, and we persuaded a private foundation to pay for it, and we identified a research team to undertake it with Pam and her colleagues at the School of Social Work of Carleton University. And we also helped Pam to choose some of the sites, including Orleans United Church. So that's what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do is take no more than a couple of minutes to tell you a little bit about Compassionate Ottawa. We began in 2016 when a group of Ottawa citizens were concerned about the state of palliative care in the city. And so they had a community gathering, and that led to a mutual desire to do something about it. And as I say, the original concern was a shortage of palliative care beds, but there was a little bit of a, there was a little, I'll say epiphany. as the group took shape. And they became engaged with what's called the Compassionate Cities movement internationally. And the basic concept here is that the formal healthcare system plays a role for people who are sick or and particularly nearing the end of life, to be sure. But what's particularly important is the role of the community as a source of support. And if you think of it, probably 95% of the help and support that people receive in life's last journey comes from friends and neighbors and support people rather than from the formal health system. And so Compassionate Ottawa evolved initially as a citizens group. It evolved and then became a not-for-profit organization with, since 2019, charitable status. And you can see here our goals. It's to fundamentally change how we think about human mortality and the end of life, and to think about it as a normal part of our human existence, and to support everyone in the community to live well and to die well. And we do that not as a social service delivery organization, but rather as an organization that does public education and also tries to be catalytic in terms of community development and capacity building. Here are some of the specific things we do. We do workshops on advanced care planning and difficult conversations, on grief and bereavement. We have a program on conversations with leaders. A couple of years ago, we had a citywide event to sort of celebrate moving beyond COVID. And we do sponsored projects, of which Help Ottawa has been the largest, not by no means the only one, but the largest one that we have undertaken so far. So I'm going to stop there, Pam, because I've kind of disrupted the agenda already, and let you get on with telling the big story.
This is where, just to show you how much we just roll with things, that was an example of that. We're just like rolling with it. It's great. And I'm also seeing my movers and shakers in the pews going, okay, let's get to the good stuff. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about, so in terms of our community-based approach, it's very, very important to recognize all the different people that have been involved in the Healthy End of Life project. So that is a combination of educators, researchers, clinicians, and we've also had a really phenomenal research project team, and many, many stakeholders, collaborators. I feel like my goal is for HELP to just keep growing and expanding, right? So this is what we're about. In terms of talking a little bit about our sites, so these are the 4 sites that I mentioned just a few minutes ago. And really our focus of choosing sites was really to work with each faith community and each community health center to discern whether people were really able and wanting to kind of move into talking about advanced illness, end of life, grief and loss, and caregiving. So it was really important for us that our communities were able to say, yeah, we want to work with you for the next 3 years, and we want to focus on these kinds of things in our site. In terms of the project plan, our project went in 4 different phases. The first one was really the preparation phase. The second one was baseline data, where we collected lots and lots of data from people within our 4 sites as well as partners. We then did an implementation phase where we had 40 40 programs, initiatives that were run across all 4 sites. And then we evaluated them and really went through, so what worked, and how do we kind of build on what worked. So I don't think this is going to be a surprise for any of you about what our data showed us, right? But in terms of what we heard from faith community members, for many people that we interviewed, there was a really strong sense of community in the faith groups. So many people felt like when they talked about their particular community, they belonged. It was a place of home. We did talk to other people, though, where that wasn't necessarily the case, right? And so what we heard is that when you're in the church and you're kind of really embedded in the church, your experience is amazing. When you're a little bit more on the fringe, it's harder. It's harder to connect in. It's harder to know what's going on. And of course, our project happened 2019 to 2022, so COVID arrived. And I'm quite certain that none of our Compassionate Ottawa sponsors or myself or anyone around the table envisioned that we would be doing this all through a pandemic. The other things that we heard about were lots of concerns about the aging population within the congregation, and that was about the fact that getting people to volunteer was getting harder. So lots of people who were volunteering were getting to an age where they had been volunteering for a long time and needed to step back, but that then meant, so who are the new volunteers? Where's the next generation? And how do we ensure that we're supporting our aging congregation, but also supporting our younger families? And a big part in our project was a real concern about caregiving and grief and loss for young families at home who are doing all of the childcare and the teaching and everything else in their homes on their own. Otherwise, what we heard, professional and informal unpaid caregivers are overwhelmed, they're stressed, and they are in need of support to prevent burnout. And that's a really big one, because while our healthcare system says that we work with patients and families, the focus is predominantly on patients. So what about all the families? What about all the caregivers who are doing their best to ensure that their loved ones have the care they receive? And that's for people with older parents, that's with partners who are ill, that's with children who are ill. Fourth thing, grieving is non-linear. Have people seen the models of grieving? Where it's like people go back to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's, which was about dying, not about grieving. But do this kind of like grief is like this, and we'll just kind of get to the end. My experience of grief, okay, it's not linear. So then what do we do in terms of supporting people, right? So we can do funerals really well, but then what? What happens a year later? What happens 2 years later? And then the last one, existing relationships enable community members to support each other. There's a real value in peer support. When I'm going through something in terms of an experience, talking to somebody else who's gone through this similar experience is actually what I need. It's not necessarily the clinical perspective, right? So having a sense of what's the knowledge base that our peers have, and how do we support that? So as I said, we had 40 initiatives, and 14 of those were held here at the Orleans United Church. When I say mover and shaker site, we can see 14 programs were run here, and that's about this community really, really jumping in and saying, we want to do great work here. So findings from Help Ottawa, and I'm almost done, really. I'm looking at Cheryl going, okay, and Heather. So key findings, context matters. So a big part of the event today is really about saying, this is what we did at Orleans, and I'm not part of the we. This is what Orleans United did. This is how it worked. What do you think about using something similar in your site? And it's going to be really different, because context really, really does matter. There's no one size fits all. And so it really needs to be about building community, having those consultations, trust building, all of those things in terms of saying what really works in your particular site. Second, building the capacity to ask and accept for help is complex. And our ability to ask for and accept help is influenced by lots of things. Telling someone that they just need to say yes when someone offers something is not going to make them say yes, okay? When we want to offer help and we feel like we know what somebody else needs or wants, we actually don't know what they need and want, right? So how do we develop that kind of relationship where when we offer help, we listen, right? We think about what we can offer, but we don't tell somebody what they need. Don't tell me what I need, right? Like, I'm not going to listen. And most people won't, right? So how do we find a way that you build that trust so that people do do say yes, right? And we can support them. Third thing, peer-led initiatives. It's not from researchers, it's not from clergy, it's not from community health workers, it's not from doctors, it's the peer stuff, right? So recognizing what you need in your community, identifying what that need is, and then figuring out how are we going to address the need, that's where the power is. And lastly, building stronger partnerships and connecting individuals to pre-existing resources. It requires trust building. It requires us listening. It requires us to do a mismatch and say, oh, we're not hearing one another, right? And coming back to the table and saying, so how do we do this? So at this stage then, I'm going to stop talking and move it over for the Orleans crew to talk about their initiatives. Cheryl.
Pam's a very tough act to follow. The help program here at Orleans United started in 2020. We spent the first part of that year just talking amongst ourselves, sort of trying to figure out what it was we needed to do. Then about mid-October that year, we really hadn't done a program yet, but we found out that the beginning of end of October, beginning of November, I think it was the 31st or the 1st of November, it was Compassionate Communities Day. And we thought, well, we have to do something for that. Well, what are we going to do? And because we had gone through all the COVID stuff, everything had been shut down. There had been many members in our community, in our church, in our family, that lost members and were not able to grieve with extended friends, even extended family. Pam lost her mom. I lost my mom, and she's on that window as well. We were only able to have 20 people at my mom's service, where if we could have held it in her church, the church would have been full for all her years of service there. So we thought we have to do something to come together as a community. So what do? It's COVID. You can't do anything indoors. So we put together very quickly, and I mean in 2 weeks, we decided what we would do. So we met under the portico here at the front. We asked people through that 2 weeks to submit names of people that they would like to have remembered. And so Brian Braceland, who is a member of our congregation, developed this memorial window. And so for each person that we were asked to remember, there's a branch on the tree for them. And Molly and Heather led the service that we had that night. We had a lovely reflection and prayers. We read slowly the names of the people that we were remembering. And then we each took a leaf, now it was a real leaf back then, and a candle. And each participant, and we were probably about 40 people, I think, each took a lighted candle, and we walked down Orleans Boulevard, across Jeanne d'Arc, back up the other side, carrying our candle. And, you know, it's funny how things happen. We wanted to involve children, because that was one of our goals, was to improve death literacy in our community. And we thought we want children to understand that it's not something to be feared. And so we checked in with some members, the young moms, and they said, you know, Cheryl, that's the night after Halloween. Our kids are not going to be in any shape to come out and do this. But as luck would have it, our scouts met that night at the church. And so they agreed to carry our window. So that was how we were able to incorporate the youth into our service. And so that was meaningful for us, and we felt that we'd achieved one of our goals. So I think it's, as Pam said, not everything we did is going to be appropriate for your faith community. So you just need to put your listening ears on and listen to what people are telling you that they need, and follow through. And that's the big thing. Make some plans and follow through. Don't be afraid. Thanks very much. Now, are there any questions, or is there anything I missed, Heather? No? Thanks very much. Who's up next?
And just to let you know, we did do something the following year when we could all get together in community. We had a service, and I can't remember, Cheryl, what we did, but we incorporated something into that All Saints Day, Compassionate Community Day, because it's not just during COVID that people die and feel separated from their supportive communities. So you can look at your own communities of faith and say, what can we do on All Saints Day? What can we do to remember the people who have been lost, and maybe not just to death, but lost to dementia or moved away, or there's been a breakup in relationships? So as Pam told you, one of the things that we found in our research, and which you all know, is that people really want to help. They want to reach out, but they're not sure how to do it. And when we interviewed people who were recipients of that help, we heard that sometimes the help given wasn't actually all that helpful. So we thought we can put something in our newsletter, which goes out every week, keep it simple. We were all brought up on Sesame Street, so our concentration is about this big. And just put something in the newsletter that's really practical. And one of the things, I don't have it as an example here, but we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use it that way. Listen twice as much as you actually speak. So one of the things we put in, this is a bit long, is during stressful times, restrict your access to the news. Offer financial support or clothing to agencies. Walk outside, meditate, commune with God, walk, and that God with Creator. What I'd asked was that we remove God and put in Creator, because we have members from various different faiths and understandings of the divine, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings with the language that we're using. Talk it out, but only for 15 minutes a day. So if your talk is about grief, about loss, about stress at work, about caregiving, 15 minutes you're allowed to unload onto the wall, onto a light, onto a friend, it doesn't matter. And then you stop, because we can't carry that grief with us in our bodies and our minds 24/7. And then every day, either write it down or in your prayers, state something that you're thankful for. So that was one of our hints. Caring Bridge. When my husband was ill and dying, I used Caring Bridge, and I found it really, really helpful. Part of it is it's a free online app. It's like a blog. And for me, it was therapeutic because I could write down all my feelings. But it came about because people were phoning friends of my husband's whom I barely knew, friends of mine, we want an update, what can we do to help? I don't have the energy to figure out what you can do to help. And honestly, I don't have the energy to tell 1 million people what's happening in our lives. So it became a blog, and people had access to it. They really appreciated it. I've had more invitations to supper over that blog that it's been really worthwhile. And it saved me a lot of stress. So those are 2 of the examples of help hints. I have a year's worth, if anybody's interested. But as Pam says, it's not about what we did here at OUC, because every community is different. So I invite you to reach out over coffee to the people that you worship with and say, how's it going? Or how did it go, and what would have been helpful? And then write it in a newsletter. So asking for help is hard. But if you only offer it, and I think everybody's here because you're caregivers and you want to help in your communities, but if you offer it, but you never ask or accept it, there's an imbalance there, right? So you're out of the give-take balance, and you have not given somebody else an opportunity to share God's love with you. And you don't value yourself the way God values you. Now, last summer, I was up at the cottage, and my husband had died in the spring, and I found out that a neighbor whom I'd grown up with at the cottage actually had died. So I was talking to his wife. I hear Robert died. You must have had a terrible year. So she spoke about that, and I tried to use 2 ears and only one mouth. And then she says to me, "So Sean died recently. How are you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing okay, but honestly, I'm not suicidal, but if I were dead, it would be okay." And she went, "Oh," and her eyes got as big as saucers, and she said, "I thought I was the only one." And what HELP wants to do is spread the word that you're never the only one, that the emotions that we go through are okay to talk about because they're universal, because we all share them. And at that point, I thought, wow, what are we doing at OUC? And we need to share this. We need to hear the voices of the bereaved. So some examples. I'm not suicidal at all, but I'd be fine if I were dead. My emotions tell you how I'm feeling. They don't tell you how I'm doing. I can cry every day and still be fine. So a friend said, whenever I hear her favorite songs or group, I was wasted. And at the beginning, I broke down in a coffee shop when I heard one of their songs. But I came to see these triggers as triggers pointing the way to what would eventually be precious memories of her and what she loved. And the person hearing this said, "Will I ever get there? And actually, I don't want to get there. I don't want memories. I just want her back." And if we don't share these feelings, then we increase that feeling of isolation and bereavement, right? So the opportunity here is not for us to give you a bunch of voices of the bereaved. The opportunity for you is to use your 2 ears and only one mouth and listen to people who are bereaved. What is it like? So I have shared what we've been doing at OUC with some friends, and every one of them has said, "I'll give you an example. Here's something for your newsletter. My husband's been dead for 15 years, and I still cannot sit at the dining room table alone." So it's those kinds of communications. Hopefully it was helpful for her to share that with me. It was helpful for me to think 15 years from now, is it still going to be this difficult? So it's listening, it's holding space for people, that they can trust that their feelings will be honored. So any questions? Okay. You're on, Ruth. Yes.
Where's the line between saying how you feel and actually making everyone understand? Because in your case, somebody said, "How are you doing?" So you said something that came back, but there must be a line there between how much you should talk about your experience and how much you should listen.
So the question was, where is the line between how much you share when somebody asks and how much you listen? And I guess the rule of thumb is 2 ears, 1 mouth, so you're listening twice as much. My general feeling is if I feel that I have this urge to share my journey with somebody that I'm listening to, and that is to the point where I'm not listening 100%, then I need to find somebody else to listen to my story. So it's a bit of self-feedback, right? But is this episode about sharing, or is it about you listening as a member of your pastoral care team or as a friend or whatever? So it's really hard to give you a direct answer, but does that help, Sandra?
So it's a prompt.
It's a prompt. Yeah.
And you listened before she asked you.
Yes. Yeah. And I wouldn't have volunteered it if she hadn't asked. Yeah. But if we're going to develop trust with people, I think we need to be open and honest about our own feelings too. So it's not like if I'm working as a nurse, I'm not going to share any of that because the relationship is very different. It's professional. But if I'm doing it with a friend, with a peer, yes, I need to be vulnerable too. Any other questions? Okay. Oh, sorry, it's Angèle.
Good afternoon. Hope Rising is a project that was given by Compassionate Ottawa. Oh, microphone, okay. Sorry, is it better now? Yeah, okay. So Compassionate Care did this project of help, as you know, and within the project of help, there was artist that was hired to do some murals. And those murals, you'll see them as you come out of the sanctuary. You'll have to look up a little bit and you'll see them. But just to tell you how it went about, when it was decided to have those murals, there was some members of this community that met with the artist and we brainstorm about ideas. How do you represent compassion and hope? So, you know, we kind of, it's when you have to sit and think about that, but it was a brainstorming session, and the artist, Gloria Salguero, which is a very, very good artist, she listened, and then about 2 weeks after, she came up with a sketch of what it would be. So under her lead, we met, I would say about 30 of us at different intervals for about 2 or 3 days. And we installed ourselves in one of the rooms here, and she had previously sketched what it was. So basically, it's some flowers that are weaving themselves towards the sun, which display, okay, oh, I'm supposed to, sorry, I think there's, okay, Hope Rising, here they are. You see the leaves are waving themselves up to hope, which represent our compassion. So it weaves around people and it gives you hope. So here it is. After Claudia had sketched everything, she told us what color to use, and she said, okay, go. So we all went and pitched in and put colors on this. So, of course, and then it was a multi-generation project, so we had some children come and paint as well. So it was quite interesting how she involved everybody, and she also encouraged participants to talk about what hope is and compassion as well.
Very much so, yeah, and the grief.
Okay, wait a minute, I'm sorry. I meant to say that this is Carla, a person that participated with her grandchildren, and she was asked how the experience was. So let's listen to what she has to say.
Very much so, yeah, and the grief and sorrow holding the joy and the sorrow at the same time makes total sense. I mean, if
Wrong one? Is it coming after? Okay,
very-
sorry. Okay. There was well, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but we have a previous minister here, Reverend Glenn Stout, who is a spiritual counselor, who wrote a poem after seeing those. And this is what he wrote. Like a sprout emerging amid the remains of winter, hope invites us to imagine how we might draw strength from our lost and live on. And here,
Hope
listen
arising. Like a sprout emerging amid the remains of winter, hope invites us to imagine how we might draw strength from our loss and live on. With soulful encouragement from community-engaged mural artist Claudia Salguero, 24 friends from Orleans United participated in different aspects of imagining, creating, painting, and displaying these 2 panels of our homegrown work of art. in the gentle conversations that wove through the entire creative process. Claudia nurtured everyone to express their feelings about loss and hope through visual images. These visions of warm light emerging from deep blue, of husk and bloom, of feather and wing, of cocoon and butterfly, enfolded us into the welcoming embrace of compassion, peace, and promise. With appreciation to Ottawa's Healthy End of Life Project, Orleans United Church's help team, council, and clergy, and with sincere gratitude to Claudia for her artistic gift and skillful inclusion, we dedicate Hope Arising to all who will feel its sacred invitation here and discover conversations of peace and promise in their own time of loss. Hope Arising.
Okay. Oh, at the end? Okay. Again. Questions? No? So we move on? Okay. I think Ruth is going to talk about the next subject.
I have to move this down. Can everybody hear me? I got the thumbs up back in the sound booth there. It's my pleasure to say a few words about another of the activities that we worked on through the HELP project, and that is the Grief Walk. Grief is physical as well as emotional. We hold it in our bodies. So while talking about our feelings with non-judgmental and supportive peers is important, physical movement also plays a role in working through grief. Ritual is important too, as it cultivates the emotions, connections with self, others, and with the universe. Grief walks therefore combine these three elements: emotional support, movement, and ritual. Our first grief walk was held in May 2022, and it was led by another of our former ministers, Reverend Carolyn Penhale. We met weekly for a period of 6 weeks. We started each session by sitting around a beautiful clay bowl, which was surrounded by stones of various shapes and sizes, like the picture there. Following a reading, there's the book, and some discussion, we each selected a stone which represented our loss and grief. This could be any loss and any aspect of grief. And then we went for a walk through the OUC neighborhood, about 15 or 20 minutes. Some of us walked alone, some walked with others in silence or in quiet conversation, and others walked around inside or outside the building itself. Upon return to the circle, those who wished to shared how the experience of walking was for them. The grief rocks were put in the bowl and water was added to cleanse our grief. We concluded the session by going outside and pouring the water in the garden, the idea being that the plants were nourished by our grief. I attended this grief walk and I found it to be a very meaningful and gentle experience. Over the past year, Reverend Mike facilitated a second session of grief walks. This time, shawls were used instead of stories to represent grief. Stones. During these sessions, a labyrinth on paper was offered, like the one you see on the screen, for those who chose not to walk. The idea is to walk the labyrinth with your finger. We have 2 videos we would like to share with you. The first one is Reverend Carolyn explaining to faith leaders the process she followed in preparing for and conducting the first grief walk.
So hi, my name is Carolyn, and I serve as one of the ministers at Orleans United Church. And Orleans United Church is one of the faith sites for the Healthy End of Life project. I've been asked to just do a quick overview of what was the process in bringing this grief walk group together. And so this is where I'm talking to fellow clergy or fellow faith leaders. And so what I will say to you is that the absolute most important thing that I did, or that I felt my role was to hold space. So when somebody on the help team came to me and said, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we have a grief group or a grief walk group? I said, okay. And I'd never done that before. Not saying okay. What I mean is I'd never led a grief walk before, per se. So I said yes, and then the Spirit showed up, and I knew what to do each step along the way. One of the first things I did was to visit Singing Pebble Books here in Ottawa and talk with the staff there. They have an excellent section on grief at that particular bookstore. And somebody there directed me towards this gem of a book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow. And the author is Francis Weller, who is a psychotherapist in private practice. He talks in this book about the 5 gates of grief. And as soon as I saw that, what popped into my head was an outline for a 6-week group, 1 gate per week with a time for closure at the end. And so that is exactly what we've done. And so week by week, we have passed through the various gates of grief using Weller's book as our guide. And our other guide on this journey was the poet, Mary Oliver. And what I would do in preparation for each week is I would go through this anthology of poems and literally do that thing you do where you open and generally pick the very first one that you open to, trusting again that I had been led to the right words for the right moment and the right week. And then each week, I gathered the participants around the circle, in this case, all women. We set up group norms. We covenanted at the beginning of our time together. And we began to introduce, or I introduced, one of Weller's rituals, which we enacted every single week, so that every week it became a little bit more embodied, a little bit more familiar. And now I think they could probably do it without my having to explain anything. It's been a simple process. Trusting the Spirit has been important. Holding the space has been important. Keeping it simple, repeating some of the same things over and over again have all worked wonders. And I have been available to hear reports in between sessions on Mondays, which is when we were walking, of how the work was working in each of these women in between our meeting times. And some weeks we would walk for 10 minutes, and other weeks we would walk for 25 minutes, partly depending on what we were focusing on that week, and partly depending on the weather. If you are considering doing this, I would say it is very important. It is very deep and profound work. It is an honor to be able to hold this space, and the participants find it meaningful. There's not a lot of planning. It doesn't take a lot of work. It just takes presence. So, blessings to you as you seek to put a group like this together. Do so, trusting that the Spirit will lead you in the way you need to go.
Okay, I might have to go back to Carla. Our second video is from a participant in the Grief Walks, Carla, and we started to see her a bit earlier and then bounced away, so there she is.
Very much so, yeah. And the grief and sorrow holding the joy and the sorrow at the same time makes total sense. I mean, if you're really in the deepest depths of grief over the loss of somebody, that just shows how much they meant to you and the joy that you had in your life with them. And you were fortunate for that. Mm-hmm. Feel it all.
Feel it all.
Yeah.
Feel it all. Thank you.
Reverend Carolyn said, it was a responsive process. There's no rules. The important thing is holding space and responding to what works for the people or the groups that you're planning a grief walk for. Are there any questions? Okay. Oh, yeah. I don't know all the psychology behind it. Sorry, the question was how the movement helps in moving through grief. I know for me personally, there's a lot going on in my head, and getting out and moving, even when I had to, give myself a little push to get out there and walk around the block or whatever, it got me out of my head. And something about the physical movement just sort of, it's really hard to describe. Something about the physical movement just sort of helped me to move through. I mean, it's never gone, but sort of helps to move through and get it out of me, if that makes sense. The question is whether doing it with walking with other people gives incentive. I think maybe for some people it could. I think it depends on the individual. I think it's walking alone, then you're sort of free to look around at the trees and the birds and so on. But I know for a lot of people, walking with someone and having the opportunity to talk about what you're feeling at the same time can be very, very helpful. So yeah, I think it really depends on the individual and the situation, the context. Yes. Yep. Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, physical movement releases endorphins, and that helps to feel better. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, I'm not sure who's up next. Is it back to Heather? Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, so when we started, or about a year into the project, we had offered a lot of projects online. And I think it was during the pandemic, people were tired of sitting in front of their computers. We were getting 4 or 5, sometimes 12 people out to a session. The sessions were great, but our mandate really was to change the community that we have here, to allow people to more easily express their vulnerability within a community of faith that's supportive. So when COVID stopped, we said, hey, we can meet in person, and we, as a help team, can actually take over a service. Now, it may not work in many other communities of faith. I think at OUC, we are blessed with a clergy leadership team that honestly follows Jesus' example of being the wind beneath our wings. Basically, go for it, we'll pick you up when it fails. So we certainly had guidance, we had support from clergy, but we took over the whole service. So we wrote the prayers, the introductions, we decided where we were going to go. One of the reasons we wanted to do it was that when everybody's here for worship, we have a captive audience, right? We can lock the door and they have to listen. The other thing was that when you hear something from your peers, as opposed to those that we think have all the knowledge, the clergy, then sometimes it's more easy to accept it and to think about it. So the people standing up here and sharing praise and prayers and experiences around grief and loss and caregiving were coming from peers, and people could relate to it. So the first one we did was on caregivers, and we had a skit where we had a gentleman who actually in real life had lost his wife when his kids were teenagers. and he was male, so he didn't like to ask for help. And we had a member of the pastoral care team who was visiting him at home and was offering support. So I hope we have that video.
Okay, so I'm Betsy Charlie, and
Wait a sec here. So this is Betsy, and she's a caregiver, still a caregiver, and she's going to talk about what all this meant to her.
So I'm Betsy Charlie, and I'm here at Orleans United Church, where we recently held a service focused on caregiving related to the HELP program. The reason that we did this, and I participated in it, is as a caregiver myself for my mom. You don't realize you're a caregiver. You don't realize the toll that it takes on you, that it's actually a job. It takes up time, energy, resources, and so many people in our congregation and in our communities are caregivers, and it takes a toll on you, and there are resources available. But I didn't know the resources were available until I started digging into it, and of course when I became part of the HELP program. So the reason we did the service was to share that knowledge with everybody, that there are resources available, that there is support, that you're not alone, and there are a lot of great people who can provide support in all kinds of different ways. The role playing that we did, I think, was especially impactful because it was just an everyday caregiving situation that could arise, and how help is available for somebody in that everyday type situation. And I think it's important to share that information with the community because, again, it's still not a very well recognized role and function that many people are playing in our communities.
Oy vey, what a day. Auto citizen, cheer me up. Oh. Hi, Cheryl. I totally forgot. Come on in, please.
Yeah, I was just down at the church and I ran into Sue from the care and support team, and she was going to bring over the casserole, but I said I'd do it for her. So here it is. I hope that it's enough for your dinner tonight.
Smells wonderful. Let me just put it down. Have a seat, please.
Oh, thanks. So how are you doing? I haven't seen you for a while, and I understand that things are kind of tough with your parents.
Yeah, you could say that.
How are you coping?
I'm coping. The fourth commandment says, "Honor thy father and thy mother."
Yep. And from what I hear, you're doing a great job of that, Gord.
Well, I'm learning it's more than sending cards at Mother's Day and Father's Day.
Yes.
Yeah. God and Jesus set a high standard.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's because Jesus hung out with all those sailors that called themselves fishermen. Nautical standards are the highest. But it's getting more and more. There's.
Well, are you trying to do it all by yourself?
Well, that's what you do. You honor thy father and thy mother.
Well, yes, but not at your expense and the expense of your family. Well, I mean, your poor kids, you've got to look after them as well.
Yeah, they're hanging in.
Yeah.
I have to prioritize taskings.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at Mom and Dad's more and more. They've got a bungalow. They downsized to a bungalow in Cardinal Creek about 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was great then. But dementia is creeping in, they're slowing down, and I'm over there with meals and doing yard work and best I can. But yeah, it's a challenge.
We've
But-
missed seeing them around OUC. You know, they were
Yeah.
such vital members of our congregation.
They were, they loved it
And
here.
yeah.
Loved it.
So, would you be amenable to receiving some help from the congregation?
You know, I always tried to identify as a doer and a giver, not a user and a taker.
Okay, well, I understand that. But what you have to understand too is part of our mission as active Christians is to follow in the way of Christ and help others, show our love and help others. So you're also helping our faith community fulfill their mission if you would receive some help or think about at least receiving some help.
So in a way, let them be doers and givers.
Yeah.
You know.
So you know,
if I do this, would I be able to be there to introduce them to
Oh,
mom and dad?
absolutely.
To make sure they're comfortable with it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you know, actually, there's the Eastern Ottawa Resource Center. You know, in the new hub up on.
Okay, yeah, I know where
on
that is.
Mayor Blum. Yeah, well, we have a collaboration with Orleans United and the Resource Center, and some of our congregation members have signed up to be helpers. And so your parents might even get a member of our congregation who they likely would know from their long time standing at OUC. So would you be interested? I could, you know, I have their number, we could give them a call.
Would I have to sign any contracts, or would it be a commitment
Oh.
on mom and dad's part?
No, and this, like, I just know about this facility, but I can't answer all the questions. So that's why I think it would be a good idea if we gave a call to the Resource Center. I'm sure there's someone there to take our call now. Would you be interested in doing that?
I'll give it a shot.
Okay, well, here, can I borrow your phone? Is that
Please
okay?
do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's ringing now.
Eastern Ottawa Resource Center, Chantel speaking. How can I help you?
Oh, hi, Chantel. It's Cheryl Marvin, and I'm a member at Orleans United Church, and I'm with one of our longtime supporters here, Gord Gray, and he's having a bit of difficulty with his parents who, you know, the frailties of age, and Gord's a real sandwich generation kind of person. So we wondered if you might be able to offer some help through the Resource Center. Can I hand the phone over to Gord now and you can have a chat with him?
Absolutely.
Okay, here he is.
Chantel, is it?
Chantel's her name, yeah. She's lovely.
Hello, Chantel. This is Gord speaking.
Hi, Gord. How are you?
Well, I'm tired. It's busy. I'm taking care of elderly parents who are experiencing a bit of an onset of dementia and, well, general slowdown. They're well into their 80s now. And I'm tired.
Cheryl mentioned that. Can you tell me a little bit more about what the pressures are facing you and your family?
Well,
a little bit more about your parents?
Yeah, they're living on their own. They've got a bungalow that 12 years ago was perfect for them when they downsized. It's becoming more and more of a challenge for them. So I spend a lot of time over there. I do some meals for them. I do some yard work. Dental and medical appointments are always a challenge, and never booked at the same time, it seems. And it's taking away from time with my two kids. But the kids are hanging in. I'm able to do it, but it's getting hard. I'm getting tired.
I hear you, Gord. Many of us would choose to age in place, but the truth is, most of us will need some support at some point in order to stick to that plan. Sometimes family and friends just aren't enough, and we're here. Actually, the Eastern Ottawa Resource Centre is funded by the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, so you're actually paying for part of these services as a part of your taxes, so you're certainly entitled to access those services. It sounds like transportation to and from medical appointments is quite the challenge.
It is, and of course it's in the middle of the working day. But I'm able to do it. I'm able to adjust my schedule as best I can. I don't want to suggest that I'm unable. I don't want to be seen as someone who's passing off duties to someone else.
Like I said, these are services that you're entitled to as part of the healthcare system here in Ontario. So the same way that you would go to see your doctor if you had an earache, you would go and see a community support service provider if you needed help to stay at home as we age. I think that there's so many support services that we can take a look at, but I don't want to overwhelm you today. But why don't we start by looking at transportation, and we can arrange a call for next week to take a look at some of the other support services available.
Okay, we can do that. Now, would I be able to be there to make sure that the parents are comfortable with this?
Absolutely. So we would start with opening a file where we would talk to both you and your parents at the same time and ask a lot of questions about their abilities, their health, their mobility needs, just to make sure that we're providing the safest and most appropriate service. And if you chose to use our service once in a while because you couldn't free yourself up from the day, or you wanted to rely on us for weekly appointments, that's up to you. And you're also welcome to accompany for the first trip, just to kind of see how it goes.
Outstanding. That's all I could possibly ask for.
Excellent. So we'll arrange a call between you and your parents, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely.
And I'll send you some information about the other support services that are available, and we can chat next week about what else we can put in place.
Sounds perfect. Thank you.
I'm so glad you called today, Gord.
Okay, I'm glad I finally came to it as well. You know, I thought when I got to this point it would be a sign of defeat, but it's actually kind of empowering. So, thank you.
So happy we could help.
Okay, bye-bye.
Now that wasn't so bad, was it?
Wasn't so hard at all.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yes.
Why did I wait so long? I'm a man. Thank you.
Just before I go, I have, it's a brochure that lists the phone numbers and contacts, so you can just put that on your fridge and you have it handy.
Excellent.
Okay?
Thank you for that.
It was so good to see you.
Good to see you. Now, what do I do with the casserole? Can I nuke it or just stick it in the oven?
The instructions are all listed inside.
Wonderful.
Okay?
Thank you.
It was so good to see you. See you in church.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Great. Bye.
Feedback that we got from the congregation was, Gord, who was the gentleman who was caregiving, you nailed it. I didn't realize that other people shared my feelings around caregiving and that feeling of being overwhelmed. So hearing it from somebody who's actually doing it, as opposed to hearing it from a doctor, a nurse, a social worker, clergy, is really different. And that was the value, I think, of sharing that time of prayer and communion with the rest of the congregation. Any questions? Okay. So our relationship with Eastern Ottawa Resource Centre continues. Sorry, do you have a question? We do, actually. The question was, do we have the resources in a handout? And we do. So the relationship started because when we did the interviewing originally for help, everybody was overwhelmed. Now, it was during the pandemic, which added a lot of stress to people, but clergy were overwhelmed. And we said, well, you know, there are agencies in the community that can offer this community support as opposed to spiritual support, which nobody can replace the clergy on. So what if we reached out and developed some kind of relationship with the Eastern Ottawa Resource Centre, which is in our area? It has been a work in progress. We're still working on it. There have been stumbling blocks because, as we know, we reach out to friends and people we feel comfortable with for help. We don't like to reach out to some unknown person at the end of the phone. So we're still working on that. I don't want you to think that these toolkits that we're showing you just happened with no work at all. There's always stumbling blocks in life, but the end result is always better than it would have been, I think, without the stumbling blocks. So that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Reverend Mike, who is one of our ministers here. Are you looking surprised? And he's going to talk about the outreach that he has done with the Eastern Ottawa Resource Centre.
That service happened before I came to minister here at Orleans United Church. Boy, you nailed it, Cheryl. And so did Gord in being gracious and accepting the help. But having a peer, having an ambassador, somebody who is relatable from within that circle of friends, circle of peers, circle of congregation is really, really important. That trust that comes from that relationship. The casserole probably helped with that too. But helping somebody wend their way through the overwhelming amount of information that is out there is very important. Having somebody who they like and trust and see in the pews. It is true, the clergy are awful busy. And we require partners within the congregation who are educated as to what the resources are, how to be skilled pastoral visitors, like Cheryl demonstrated so aptly in the video that we had today, and come with folks to hold space where you can hear what some of their needs are, and to graciously offer to help connect them. And making that phone call and connecting Gord, really important. Annie Parisian from EORC was to be here today to speak to you all about some of the things that the EORC does, but she came down with a stomach bug and told me that she probably shouldn't be here, and I agreed. It was gracious for her to offer to be here, but also gracious to not come as well. And she was going to share some of the resources that the EORC has with you as caregivers or potential caregivers. And if you're not finding yourselves living in the catchment area of the Eastern Ottawa Resource Centre, there's Cumberland just to the east of us. And in one of the handouts that was at the table back there is a list of other community resource centers. They might not offer exactly the same services, but I think they more or less rhyme with each other. My interaction with the EORC and the Cumberland Resource Centre just in the last year that I've been here at Orleans United Church, and in years previous at Rothwell United Church, which also worked with the EORC, was that they want to be known. They want to be helpful. And they could produce PDF files and websites, and they could send handouts all around, but that's just one way to get the message across. And I think what the Help Project found, and what Cheryl demonstrated, is that really the best way is that peer relational way of sharing what the resources are. Cheryl discerned what Gord's needs were and connected Gord to an agency that could help provide practical help. So what practical help is there out there? Annie was going to tell you about some of these things, and she also graciously sent me an email to talk a little bit about what EORC does, just to pique your interest. And if you are caregivers, if you are peer supporters, these are some of the things that might be available to folks to offer practical help. So at EORC, their Community Support Programs Department offers a comprehensive range of services designed to support seniors in maintaining their independence at home for as long as they choose. It also offers support to people of all age groups as well. I worked with EORC to develop a toolkit for me in my other profession. I'm a chaplain for the Canadian Armed Forces, and I was asking for resources that could help out young troops who are living at or around the poverty line, and she had a whole lot of specialty resources for them too. We'll talk about these ones though today. Transportation, like Cheryl and Chantel talked about with Gord, to medical appointments, essential service trips, covering needs like blood work or eye care, physiotherapy, hospital visits, Meals on Wheels. Help out with that. Having our basic needs looked after. The hierarchy of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Having our basic needs looked after, and as we go up that pyramid, having other needs looked after help us to be healthy individuals. A good meal or a casserole can work wonders. A grocery bus. Organize a bi-weekly trips to Metro for shopping, and this is not just for shopping, but it also fosters social connections between folks. Telephone assurance program. They conduct weekly or daily, even check-ins for people's well-being. So if someone's feeling isolated, alone, or if the family needs some reinforcements to help people feel connected, they can help out with that just by a phone. They even do friendly visiting. Weekly volunteers will visit isolated seniors or folks who are lacking supports. Now, these are working well. They could work better, she says, because they need more volunteers. So I think she was going to make that pitch to y'all today, but I'll do that for her. There are 15 seniors connected with the EORC who are currently looking for matches for some of these programs. So the need is there, and the demand is there as well. They're also looking for volunteers for medical transport, meal delivery, friendly visits, and telephone assurance calls. So if that's something you're interested in or have time for, or maybe know somebody who is, they could certainly use your help. They also offer services for caregiver support. We provide individual assistance navigating the system and accessing community services, which can be tough. So having a connector to connect someone to other connectors can be helpful, because there is a web of things out there and winding roads to wend, but there are people who want to help. Home help, maintenance, and respite care. They offer referrals to screened professionals for housekeeping, companionship, and more. So if trust is an issue and having someone come into your home, developing that trusting relationship with the EORC might open some doors and allow that help to come in and maybe not be so scary. Snow Go subsidies. They provide support for low-income seniors dealing with snow removal. Not so much of a problem this year, but we'll pay for it next year, I'm sure of it. Parkinson support groups facilitate French and English groups for those with Parkinson's and caregivers. Foot care clinics offer nurse-led foot care clinics at select locations. They have wellness and fitness programs, yoga, chair exercises, which are free for people who are 60 and over. There's an adult day program, structured dementia care, with activities and respite for caregivers, and talk about something that could be a lifeline for caregivers and people receiving care as well, just to make that community, but also to give caregivers rest. You need rest to care. Crisis intervention, access and provide support for clients in crisis situations as well. So those are some of the things that they do offer. They also wanted to point you to 211. Has anybody heard of 211 here? I think probably a few of you are not. Well, it's not 911, it's 211. And it's just a telephone number. It's a helpful resource for community information. 211 provides accurate information for referrals in English and French. And the information that you can get from dialing 211 offers a range of basic contact details to detailed explanations of community service programs and agency policies. Referrals are made by specialists who access needs, identify appropriate resources, and help connect individuals to support services, including community, social, government, and health support. Dialing 211 will connect you as somebody requiring care, or even a caregiver looking to resource others with trained specialists who will guide folks to suitable programs. So, there is a lot of, no pun intended, help available out there, but it is a lot. And sorting through it and sifting through it is work in and of itself. The people who are offering the help want to help. They want to be known. And HELP, Healthy End of Life Project, has identified that peer ambassadors to places like the EORC or other helpful programs is perhaps the best way to connect people to receive the help that they need. I would ask if there were questions, but that's all I know. So reach out to them. They will be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions about the overall program? Pardon? Yes, you can say several things.
The one thing I wanted to mention when I was speaking earlier is that even though some of the programs that you might develop and present don't seem to have a lot of uptake, not a lot of people attending, for the people that do attend, it makes the world of difference. So, as I said earlier, don't be discouraged, keep on trying, because it will make a difference in other people's lives.
That's true. I'm just going to share a little incident that occurred to me. I'm a licensed lay worship leader with the United Church, and I was at an unidentified church. I went during Lent 5, so the fifth week in Lent, and I talked about Jesus knowing about his upcoming death and being, I would imagine, terrified and wanting to talk about his feelings and his fear with his close friends, the disciples. And what did they do? The same thing many of us do. They ran away. And so when we recognized that Jesus was being vulnerable and opening up himself to support from other people, then we should do it. So after that service, I mean, usually people are pretty polite, right? They come up and say, I'm really glad you're here, let's go for coffee. Nobody said a word. I felt like there was this wall between me and the congregation. And I'm thinking, am I projecting? Because I wasn't sure how it was going to go over. But honestly, I was back there after Easter, and they were welcoming and relaxed. And I think people are just uncomfortable with talking about asking for help, talking about bereavement, talking about caregiving. And I think everybody in this congregation is from a Christian background. And if you're not, but you still know that Jesus was a pretty good guy out there, we need to follow his example. And we need to open up and be vulnerable and share our feelings and reach out to others to help. So I'm going to reach out to you and say we have food and tea and coffee in the hall at the back. Please join us. We can share our feelings about this or any other subjects. And I think we should close in prayer. Loving Creator, we thank you for this opportunity that started 3 years ago to explore what we as your children need, what we need as individuals to help us grow and get through this life journey, what we need to help each other in that journey. We thank you for this opportunity today to share our findings with other people so that we can spread your love and your care and your compassion throughout our communities of faith and throughout our communities at large. Amen. So join me for food.
I learned an awful lot about HELP today. Like I said, I've only been here for a year, and the way you folks put it all together today was super helpful for me as your minister. And so what I would like to ask for a formal round of applause to the HELP team who put this together today, and and to our guests as well, but also for all of you for coming here and showing your compassion and your desire to help. Thank you.